Good morning and welcome to our February coffee hour. For those of you who don't know me, although I think most of you do, I'm Agnieszka Carpenter and I'm the Executive Director for BioME. BioME is Bioscience Association of Maine. We're a trade industry group devoted to advancing life sciences in the state of Maine and beyond. And a coffee hour is our monthly series, although we did take a couple months break, but we're back and I'm so glad to see so many people logging in today. We missed you. Today's event is called Innovation and Insights, and we have 4 great innovators. Here are our innovators. I will introduce them in just a minute. And before we jump into our presentations, I just wanted to also thank our sponsors. These are our sponsors for 2022. Without you, we couldn't put together events like this. We can do a lot of good things that we're doing. And if anybody's still interested in sponsoring us in 2022, that's also a possibility. Just write me an email after this event. A couple of logistics. I mentioned we have 4 speakers and our chat function is on. If you have any questions for our speakers, please leave your questions in the chat as we're going. And then towards the end, we have about 10 to 15 minutes where we're going to be asking these questions. You can also utilize the chat function to just say hi or leave us a comment or just say whatever you want to say, because this is our way to make it a little bit more interactive. We're really hoping to get back to our in-person events as soon as we can, but for now we have Zoom. So let's use it. Okay, I think that's all for the logistics. Once again, welcome to anybody who's joining in a little later. And I will do a double introduction because our first 2 speakers will be talking about a collaboration. So we have Dr. Samir Haydar from Maine Medical Center, and we have our very own board member, Dr. David Eagleson, the president of the Baker Company. And I think Samir will start and there will be a bit of back and forth. Okay, Samir, you can share your screen. Okay, and we need you to unmute, sorry.
Okay, having technical problems here. All right, you can hear me.
We can hear you.
And I'm gonna share my screen and make sure that you guys are seeing the right thing. Are you seeing a big screen that says Cape Partnership?
Absolutely.
All right, and I got share sound optimized for video. Okay, hello everyone. I'm Samir Haydar. I'm an emergency physician at Maine Medical Center, where I serve as the director of quality for our emergency department and also physician advisor for hospital flow. So my focus in life in emergency medicine is really operations, providing the best care possible for our patients. And I'm going to share with you today an innovation that actually a couple of my residents who were chief residents at the time came up with during our little COVID pandemic here. So this story starts with what I like to term as a very special day, if I can get my slides to move. Let's see here. This was special in that it was career defining for me in many respects. I've been a physician in emergency medicine for over 15 years. And this is something, you know, when you talk about pandemics, it's something that we like to plan for. This is our World Series. Like, we look forward to crazy things happening. And we actually were fairly unprepared for this one. So Friday the 13th was actually the day that the state of Maine declared COVID as community spread. I was working clinically. We had over 100 patients in the department, and 50% of them met criteria for what we call a PUI, so person under investigation. For COVID, it's person under investigation for COVID, but it can be for Ebola, it can be for influenza, whatever it is. So very busy day, 50% of the patients all of a sudden meeting criteria. We actually had 6 rooms that were negative pressure isolation equipped. And, you know, we've been watching what was happening in New York and looking at our numbers, and we were prepared to convert 8 other rooms into isolation spaces, but we weren't there yet. And then all of a sudden we had to deal with 50 patients. And Fortunately, myself and a number of other individuals who are also involved with the state of Maine EMS were working clinically. So we had all of our kind of disaster preparedness and operation folks there. And we were able to convert our pediatric emergency department into a COVID unit. You can see we just kind of slapped some plastic together. And then from that day forward, that unit for the next 14 to 16 months became what we called the castle. It was a negative pressure unit. We had shifts from anywhere from 8 to 12 hours wearing PAPRs. It was essentially unattainable for us. Now, as while this was clearly a disaster for us that we had to deal with in real time, we all know that the pandemic really was a disaster of global proportions. And there's all sorts of statistics you can look at to talk about this pandemic. And this is one we like, it came from NPR. It states that over $629 million were used to convert 17 different civic centers into these kind of mass casualty areas where they could take care of patients. It estimated that there was over about 15,000 beds at a cost of 42,000 plus for each bed. Now, if you watch the news or remember this, these civic centers were turned into these kind of mass units and then they laid empty. Now, they weren't designed to be negative pressure. They were not designed to be isolation based. They're really designed to take care of the patients that didn't meet COVID criteria. And we all know what happened. Everyone stayed home and hunkered down. So we spent a lot of money and didn't actually use it. Now, as an academic institution, we were asked to test all sorts of different solutions for the COVID pandemic. And two of my residents who were chief residents at the time were on rotation, and we were asked to test this intubation box, which was actually the solution that they had for us. And when you intubate, which is putting a tube into someone's throat, or do some other procedures, you can actually aerosolize this virus. And so the idea is that you need some sort of protective covering. So we tested this out and the residents came back and they said, this thing's useless, we can't use it. It's restrictive, we need something else. We were also asked to test all sorts of different solutions. And some of them we just said, you know what, I don't think that we're gonna test this. But certainly if you were to watch the news, people were trying to try all sorts of different things. But in the clinical setting, we really just wanted a solution that seemed practical, something that not only we could just use for procedures, but something that we could use to take care of our patients long-term. Because when you look at the COVID pandemic in the hospital setting, it's really about loss of capacity. All of a sudden, we can't use rooms that we used to use to take care of patients that we still need to take care of. So we wanted something that a patient could stay in for an extended period of time. And so we came up with the CAPE. So this is the collapsible aerosol particle enclosure. And I think the next slide is a short video. So hopefully you can see it. And it really, what I want you to pay attention to during this video is how the smoke or mist machine, everything's being sucked into the device. So nothing is actually able to come out, because what this device is a negative pressure device that sits on a stretcher and can make the stretcher itself an isolation space that's safe for the patient and as well for the providers taking care of the patient.
The collapsible aerosolized particle enclosure, otherwise known as the CAPE, is a novel solution for airborne infection control. This stretcher-based mobile isolation solution expands healthcare isolation capacity by offering an additional layer of healthcare protection for providers. It allows for the safe administration of high-risk treatments and procedures such as BiPAP, high flow, intubation, and cricothyroidotomies. The CAPE adapts to most bed types and positions and provides a comfortable, non-claustrophobic environment for patients. With over 90 air exchanges per hour, this HEPA-filtered device meets ISO containment level 6 criteria, as well as federally defined negative pressure criteria, even with the treatment ports open. By drawing air from the outside, this device allows providers access to essential anatomy, allowing them to provide critical, life-saving procedures.
Okay, so what we really wanted was something this was actually really important to the residents. First, they wanted something that was reusable. It was gonna have to be made out of plastic, but they wanted it to at least be recyclable or reusable for many uses. But most importantly, from a capacity standpoint, it needed to be comfortable for patients because we're expecting that they were going to be in there for hours and even potentially days. We also wanted it to be used for, different types of stretchers and beds, and make sure that it was affordable, at least a better alternative than one's currently available. So the journey, really came up with a concept. The residents came to me and said, hey, I think we need a tent. Now, both these residents are in wilderness medicine and they're camping all the time and climbing mountains. So it wasn't surprising that they wanted another tent. They kind of came up with a drawing, and then I said, you know what, go ahead and make it. So they went to Home Depot, and the next day I came in, they had this PVC piping tent set up. So it was a great idea, but really taking it forward wouldn't have gone anywhere unless we had the right materials. And in order to do that, we really need to get some industry collaboration. And so we were able to access MaineHealth's innovation network and partner with Baker Company and TP&E. You're going to hear from David and talk about, all the things that they were able to provide us. Like, this device was an idea, but it needed to be tested. It needs to go into a clinical environment. We need to get it through EUA testing through the FDA. And so in order to do that, we really need to build a partnership and, form an operational structure. So we had to do customer discovery. This is our chief nursing officer reviewing it. It went all the way from the frontline EVS. Those are individuals who clean hospital rooms and devices in the hospital. They had to look at it and give us recommendations. Nurses, physicians, medical students, patients, chief operating officer of the hospital, chief medical officer of the hospital. We really wanted to get their sign off to believe that they would be able to use this device in the hospital. We also did clinical simulation testing, which is important when you're trying to get an EUA. You need to demonstrate that providers and patients are comfortable in this. We're able to test it for a number of different procedures that we do in the emergency department setting or in the hospital setting. We've also published this and through the emergency medicine literature, the Society of Academic Emergency Medicine and American College of Emergency Physicians, and we were runner-up for the American College of Emergency Medicine Innovator of the Year, which was very cool. I'm going to leave off to David because Baker did a lot of the laboratory testing, and without their support and collaboration, we wouldn't have been able to do this. It's all you, David.
Okay, thanks, Samir. Am I coming through loud
Yeah.
and clear for everybody? All right, great. So, yes, the laboratory testing, it was a great concept that the team came up with. One of the critical bits as we started working with them and our other partners started working with them was actually demonstrating that it did perform as intended and quantifying the protection provided by the device. So a further part of that development process, that journey, was actually bringing it to our labs here at Baker and really challenging the device. And we did that through a couple of different methods. The biggest one was really to actually create an artificial or a simulated contamination event inside to a much greater degree than would happen from patient respiration. And then to use particle counters to actually sample the air and quantify how much of that challenge escaped the CAPE enclosure. Where we've come to through another number of iterative rounds of testing is a device that has a very rapid change of air through the ventilation system. So there's actually a fan and HEPA filter system that's connected to the device to provide that air change, which greatly reduces the exposure of people outside the device to any contamination generated inside of it. Any of the air removed is through a HEPA filter at 99.99% filtration efficiency. The entire enclosure cleans out in less than approximately 2.5 minutes. So that's basically, if you think of creating a cloud of particles, contamination inside, how long it takes to return to the same level as the ambient background. One of the critical bits is establishing that the enclosure operates under at least a negative 0.01 inches of water column, negative pressure or vacuum, which is important because that's the standard defined by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention for patient isolation rooms. So, basically we're trying to replace or offer a better alternative to turning over large footprints to negative pressure rooms. It's important that the device offers the same level of performance as those rooms do. Also tested the sound created by the device to make sure it would be comfortable and within safe limits for both patients and caregivers. Go ahead and advance. Yeah, so Samir mentioned this was really a collaboration between a team. Kind of the innovation network of Maine here came together to make this happen. The physician, Samir and his resident physicians, who were really the original concept and have provided guidance right through on what are the features and functionality that's important to providing good patient care. Leadership in the healthcare system, with Samir and the leaderships at MaineHealth supporting him throughout this, and really bringing industry in with myself at Baker and our other industry partners, Thermoform Plastics, and then other expertise in the area, which I'll touch on later. You can go ahead forward now.
Let's go. It's not moving. Hold on. There we go.
Right. So a little bit about Baker, if you're not familiar with us. You may not know Baker. You may know our brand name SterilGuard if you've ever done any cell culture work in your laboratories, or in the pharmacy preparing IVs, or processing samples in the microbiology lab. We're based right here in Sanford, Maine, and we're one of the world leaders in contamination control equipment for laboratories, both in a research and a clinical setting. We've got a full manufacturing facility here in Sanford, Maine, including our research and development laboratories, which were key to this project. And what Baker brought to the table here was the knowledge and experience with filtration and ventilation in order to properly specify and design that component of the CAPE system, as well as the expertise in our own laboratories to test the system in order to validate its performance for informing the iterative R&D process, and also now for generating all the data required for the FDA with the regulatory side of things. Other partner, oh, images didn't get in there, okay. Got images, but that's all right. Thermoform Plastics of New England is based in Biddeford, Maine. It's been around for a number of years now, over 25 years. They have a lot of experience in plastics, particularly in the biomedical space. Did some work early on with kind of a precursor to the current test components, the Binax test components that are now similar components that the COVID tests, the rapid COVID tests are based on. Really have a focus on designing solutions to solve customer challenges and mold millions of parts a year for customers across all inventory and across the world, really. One of their early innovations in the pandemic was a face shield system, also to prevent aerosol spread through respiration. The key contributions from Thermoform were the iterative development of the working prototypes of the CAPE enclosure in order to improve the function and manufacturability, designing and sourcing of the CAPE frame and tent enclosure, and then assembly and production of the CAPE units. Really, Paul Tyson and his team at Thermoform were the plastics folks, I guess you could say, bringing that expertise of what materials would be appropriate to the application, and then how to actually create the product using those materials. So the project from the start is really, I think, a great story of Maine's biomed innovation network. There's been a lot of pieces brought to the table. Todd Keeler, who's working with MaineMed on the innovation team, was someone I knew from the Bioscience of Maine events over the years. And, he reached out to me. There's some other connections made to bring thermoformed in. We've been working with Tony Perkins of Bernstein Schur on actually what's been needed to commercialize this, to form a venture to bring it to market, to get IP agreements in place. Working with Paul Fitzpatrick, who Paul, I think, is on the call today. Yes, who has been a consultant to us, and he has a lot of experience in bringing FDA registered medical devices to market. And then again, MaineMed and the MaineHealth innovation team has been a real asset through this and supporting things, both financially, some of the seed funding for the project, as well as in supporting, bringing resources to bear to help throughout the process, things like the customer discovery, getting us hooked up with a regulatory consultant, use of the simulation lab, and just a real, really supportive throughout the whole process. Where we are now is we've kind of got a business model put together, sort of the razor and razor blade model. The frame itself and the fan filter unit will be more durable items, and the tent will be reusable, a multi-use item, but not necessarily a durable long-term asset type of item. So we anticipate that those will be cleaned a number of times during their useful life, but then eventually replaced. Down the road, once we kind of get the first part off the ground here, the strategy will be to out-license part of this, look for a partner who has wide reach and distribution into the hospital market, as well as to develop further markets for things like surge capacity for disaster response in the military, FEMA, and other areas like that. And certainly you could imagine that there's a need for this really on a global basis. So that could be down the line as well. Yeah. So it is a fairly big market, and we're trying to put the infrastructure together in order to take advantage of that and to reach the market. We're really initially focusing on the inpatient hospital market, but there's a lot of other potentials down the line after we kind of use that as a springboard to get going in terms disaster relief, field hospitals, military, long-term care facilities, and even transport. Again, the actual design and construction of the enclosure is such that it can be adapted very easily to a number of different environments of care and the standard equipment used there. So kind of in summary, what our real value proposition is all about is how do we avoid the unnecessary and inflexible expense of the large investments made in sort of field hospitals and converting parts of existing hospitals over to negative pressure space. Where we are right now is, I think we've mentioned a number of times through the talk that we're in the process of obtaining an emergency use authorization from the FDA. We have all of our data package ready and are working with our regulatory consultant on getting that submitted to the FDA. I should back up, actually. Even before that, we have formed a joint venture formed as an LLC between the various principals involved here, and are in the process of kind of securing that with there's a patent that's been applied for. It hasn't been ruled on yet, but that the rights to license that patent will be held by that company as well. So the FDA emergency use authorization going on now. Once that's obtained, then we would do what's called a limited market release, where we would work with, kind of a handful of healthcare systems to start the device in use and use that as, essentially, I guess I'd say essentially a clinical trial. We won't I don't think we'll be terming it that just because of the way the FDA defines that, but that will determine sort of our final configuration that we'll use for an eventual 510K filing with the FDA. And then parallel to that, we'll also be setting up our organization. So that's kind of a summary about the CAPE. And I think just it's been real exciting to be part of that, to be brought into that early and have my company be able to help contribute to developing something that I think is going to be a real game changer for healthcare systems and healthcare workers. And a real, I guess I'd say, so far, success story to Maine's Biomed Innovation Network.
Okay, well, thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much, David and Samir. I really appreciate all the entertaining little snippets in this presentation, but also just want to commend you on this wonderful collaboration and wishing you all the best in the future. And I do see some questions trickling into chat. And just as a reminder, we are saving them till the end for the Q&A. So please keep asking questions in the chat and don't feel like we're not answering them. We're just saving them. Okay, so now it's time for our third speaker today, and it's Dr. Caitlin Howell from University of Maine. We at BioME know Caitlin pretty well because Caitlin's on our education committee doing some great work there, but today she's going to be talking about UMaine's collaboration with SAPI. And Caitlin, whenever you're ready.
Yes, thank you. Happy to be here today and to share a little bit of what we've been up to. I think it's a very interesting contrast after hearing about the excellent work being done by Samir and David, because it kind of takes a different approach to this industry academic collaboration. So I am part of the Department of Chemical and Biomedical Engineering at the University of Maine. And I actually am from Maine originally and came back to Maine after working a little bit down in the Boston area at the Wyss Institute for Biologically Inspired Engineering. Now, that institute, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, is actually really fascinating and interesting. They do a lot of really great work, but one of their focuses is really technology translation. How can we create solutions, but also move them into the market, not just make things that stay on a lab bench somewhere? And so when I came to the University of Maine, this was really the world that I was coming from and I was really excited about, and I wanted to continue to do as part of my work here. So I have this as my background picture because Maine is full of trees, right? And as a state full of trees, we have a very strong paper industry. And in the Department of Chemical and Biomedical Engineering, we have some very strong ties with paper companies because it's a very traditional department in that sense. Let's see if I can advance my slide here. There we go. So when I came, I started hanging around with, the chemical engineers and their friends, the folks working in the paper industry. And I got introduced to some folks from this paper company here, which you may have heard of, SAPI North America. They have a pretty big plant down in the Westbrook area. And they do something that really surprised me. So probably like most of you, when I think paper industry, I think paper products, right? But this company actually does something a little bit different. So they make a material on a huge, huge scale, and these huge by the ton rolls, but this material is not just paper. It is actually a paper bottom with a very, very thin plastic layer on top. Now, with this material, they can actually put a texture into that plastic layer on top and have it be basically whatever texture you want. So they make this in a roll-to-roll process, which you can sort of see outlined in my slide there. They run it through a coater, and then they run it through a machine that will actually cure it with a giant electron beam as it's pressed up against this roll that has the pattern they want. And when they unroll that, they actually end up with this material that is the paper with the texture on top in that very, very thin plastic layer. So they sell this material to their customers who take that texture on the paper backing, press it up against a material that they want that texture in. And when they separate them, as you can see in that picture there on the bottom left, they end up with the pattern in their material of interest. Now, their primary customers are actually the textile and fashion industries. So if you're thinking those nice BMW seats that are made out of leather, yeah, that leather pattern probably didn't come from a cow. It probably came from Sappi. But when I actually met the folks that were doing this technology, I was really impressed because the range of textures that they can produce using this method is absolutely extraordinary. So there you can see some of their, very common textures. But take a look at this one. This is actually a nanoscaled texture. What you're seeing is the light interacting with that nanoscaled structure and being diffracted out according to its wavelength. This is incredible from a material science point of view, that they can make a nanoscaled texture by the ton and think nothing of it and sell it to the fashion industry. And even better, they can make this hierarchically. What you're looking at in that picture is a nanoscale texture on top of a macro scale texture. So as a material scientist, as someone trained in biomedical engineering, goes, what are you doing? How can you be using this to make shoes and handbags? Have you any idea what we could do with this technology in the biomedical area? So of course we're like, well, no, we don't know, but if you want to play, go ahead. And so this is how my story differs a little bit from Samir and David's project, because unlike them, where they had a very clear problem that they're going to solve, in my case, I have this amazing technology that is being used for something entirely different. And I think that I can take it and use it for the biomedical biosciences part of the world, right? So this is what we did. So I knew that diagnostics are a huge, important part of medicine, right? We have seen this very, very clearly in the pandemic, where the moment we started to get widespread availability of tests, it was a game changer, right? At home, if you can test yourself and see that you're positive, you know that you need to isolate and take care of yourself until you're better. At the beginning, when we were all going, who has it, who doesn't have it, we have no idea, it was very, very stressful and very dangerous, right? That was the reason we had the lockdowns, because we didn't know what else to do. So the problem, though, is that a lot of diagnostic tests, if you want to do something more complicated than just your straightforward lateral flow assay, it becomes kind of difficult. So the way that a lot of this is done right now is complex microfluidics, which can control liquids, where they move, what they mix with, where they go, when they go there, things like this. You can do a lot of very complex biochemistry if you can control things on this level. But what we currently have to control things at this level is pretty expensive materials. Frequently, these are made from glass, from silicone rubbers, which tend to be very expensive. And if you're looking for something that's a one-use, single-use type of disposable material, this just prices you out of the market. You can't make these things on any type of scale at a price point that regular folks can use for diagnostics or doctors' offices can use. So this is where we thought we might be able to help demonstrate how this roll-to-roll technology that's being used by this Maine paper company could be a step towards creating more complex diagnostics, but still at an affordable price. So what we did is we actually took some of their material, and this was one of the ones that I showed you in the previous slide as one of their textures that they use for things like handbags. We slapped a top on it, stuck some fluid channels right in there, and let it go. And what you're actually seeing is this texture device being turned into a microfluidic system. We were really surprised at how well this worked and how easy it was. And we could use it just with laminate sheets and stickers, stuff we get from the office supply store. But it worked really well. But of course, this pattern was not what we needed to be able to do anything that sort of resembled microfluidics. So we actually developed a system to be able to rapidly prototype a microfluidic texture using SAPI's industrial equipment. And if you want to know about that, I'm very happy to tell you the story, but I'm going to hold off because I only got 10 minutes here. But basically, we ended up with what you see in the picture in front of you. Now, the story I usually tell is one of these is the typically expensive glass silicone microfluidic device, and the other is a mass manufactured paper company printed device. Can you tell the difference? Most people can. Rhetorical question. Here it is. So the one on the far right is, of course, the roll-to-roll printed device. Now, they can make this product at 4,500 meters per squared per hour. So this thing is about a few centimeters. So do the math in your head, figure out how many of those we can be printing off at lightning speed. And they can do that very, very quickly. So we were excited about this and we are taking this to the next step. But in the meantime, this project sort of exploded. This concept of we can create materials that can handle fluids at a very low cost, very quickly, and with very, very accurate reproduction. So in the meantime, while we're continuing this work, we are also working with, again, the Wyss Institute, sponsored by the National Science Foundation, to take this approach, but instead of using it for a diagnostic, use it to create a water purification system that can kill bacteria with electrical currents. So they're, again, interested in the technology translation aspect. They need a cheap way to create lightweight microfluidic systems. We got it, we formed a partnership, and this is now going forward. We're also working with researchers at the Autonomous University of Madrid in Spain, which is actually where I am right now. I'm talking to you from Spain today. And it's because we're working with their experts in fluidics and microdroplet generation. Now, this is a new technology that's coming online to be able to allow us to separate out individual cells in a liquid system and look at them individually as droplets, tiny, tiny little test tubes, basically. Now, this is really difficult to produce at cost because you need really small channels. But as I showed you before, SAPI can produce nanoscale stuff. So I'm here with a bunch of printed microdroplet generators working on characterizing them. It's very exciting. And finally, we're also working with the folks at Northeastern University and the Roux Institute to be able to actually use SAPI's nano-patterned material as a water detection system to identify when water is contaminated, what it's contaminated with in a very low cost and automated way. It's a partnership with Amy Mueller down there, works in artificial intelligence and water treatment. And it's really exciting to see that going forward. And the last thing, we are finally also taking this approach and adapting it to space agriculture, because in space, they need low cost, lightweight ways of getting information. And so we think that we'll be able to use this approach to be able to remotely detect the quality of water in space agriculture and give alarms to the astronauts when something is going wrong so they can go and fix it. So that is my story of spontaneous serendipitous collaboration with the paper industry and how we're taking this amazing material and beginning to apply it to things where we need low cost, lightweight solutions to be able to make the world a better place. So that's all I got for you. And I would be very happy to answer questions when everybody's finished talking.
Thank you so much, Caitlin. This is once again an incredible story. I actually didn't know about most of it. And I just want to say, isn't it great that even though Caitlin is in Spain, we're still able to have her here at our coffee hour. Thank you so much. I see some questions trickling in. Please ask your questions. And now our last speaker today is Justin Hafner from KinoTek. Justin.
Yep. Hey, thanks. Thanks, and great to see you all. It was great to hear from Dave, Samir, Caitlin, awesome, cool stuff that everyone's working on. I'm a little bit different, I've nothing to do with, COVID or, really in, specifically to kind of medical applications or paper, what we're working, we're strictly a software company. So KinoTek, we were founded back in 2018. I was a student at the University of Maine, and really around this idea to make anatomy education more immersive. But that's how, in the startup world, right? You say you want to start as one thing and you end up going into many others. So started out really, around this idea of anatomy education. But as we learned and started working with people, we saw, different applications for this technology, and we ended up having a list of like 5 different areas that we could go into. We didn't really know where to go. And then, the pandemic hit, and we saw that as a huge opportunity. Digital health, changed everything. You hear a lot about telehealth, all these new trends that are coming up that really, we never talked about, 3-4 years ago. And the pandemic accelerated all of them. And we had a perfect application at the time to transfer and really provide a solution for physical therapists, and chiropractors and other people who really look at movement as a way of assessing, evaluating, or prescribing any sort of rehab. So we saw this opportunity, and we're like, okay, so everyone's remote. How are we going to do this? We have to adapt and try to use computer vision. And we luckily had a great partnership with Microsoft that we developed, and we're able to bring their new camera to market, which is called the Microsoft Azure Connect camera. I have one right here, if you guys can see. It's about the size of my palm. It's pretty small, sits on a tripod. It's really simple stuff. And that is this technology called LiDAR. You might see LiDAR, right, in some autonomous vehicles, electric vehicles. And it's used heavily in forestry, agriculture. And we're really the first company to bring it to market. Specifically, it's used in different aspects of healthcare, but specifically for physical therapists and chiropractors. And what LiDAR really allows you to do is map out the body in 3D, sending out millions of light impulses a second, and we can get a full 3D, basically image of you as you move or as you do anything. So in a clinical setting, physical therapists, chiropractors, right now, they rely on their eyesight to assess movement, to see how someone's moving, to really look at and prescribe any sort of rehab or justify care to an insurance company. But it's very, very, very subjective. There needs to be more objectivity. And with telehealth emerging, objectivity became more and more important because, it's a totally different world trying to ask someone to do a squat or some sort of movement through Zoom than it is seeing it in person. Really, there was a huge need for objective data and insights. And so, we took our platform of, visualization, anatomy, and started working with physical therapists and chiropractors to build a platform that incorporate all the things they need in their care process, no matter where they're at in the world or how they're moving. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to screen share and show you, what this looks like. Can you guys see? The KinoTek website, or is it on the wrong screen?
Yes, we can see the website.
Okay, perfect. So how this works, this is the web app. You could, hit this camera button and bring it right to the camera, but I don't have room to do a squat and everything right now in my office, but I'll show you some past recordings. So you would search for your client. I'm going to go to my demo account here, and you'll see by visit, every time that they've came in, the different movements that you were assessing, what you were looking at. So if I look at the overhead squat we did last week, so bring you to this page. So initially it shows you a number of different things. This first piece, this bar here, is a reference range for how you're moving, and shows you where you're at in regards to the general population. So, this is looking specifically at hip mobility, and where you're at, this, I forget who did this squat, but they had quite good range of motion. Right here, you would see this asymmetry. Right now, asymmetry is assessed by, again, all eyesight and just an assumption. So we're really the first one to really show, a percentage of difference and change between one side of the body to the next, which is a game changer for the industry, because that can show and identify any sort of risk for injury, pathologies, months and months ahead of time before any injury actually occurs. Here, you'll see this improvement from the previous visit. So the last time that you saw that patient, the range of motion improvement. Now, in a care setting, it wouldn't go up 43% from last week to this week. Again, this is our demo account, but it kind of gives you an idea what that would look like. And then here is your improvement from the very first time that you ever came in to the clinic, or to see your physical therapist, and you could really track your rehab progress. So we wanted to get this into a visual. We just hit this down arrow, and you can see So in a care setting, and this is our demo count, you would see a nice kind of upward linear trend, which is very motivating for a client and a patient. But what this shows you really is day by day, how you're progressing for whatever body segment you want to look at for whatever movement. So, this is the hip, right? We could look at the knee. We could look at different types of movements and variations within the knee, ankle dorsiflexion. And so now when we, the cool part about all this and the piece that stayed true to what we've done since our beginning of days is the educational side. So if we hit this view button, it'll take us down to that port in the movement. So what you'll see here, this is a full 3D scan of someone doing a squat. The red are your muscles are shortening, blue your muscles are lengthening. It's really giving you a full insight on how your body is moving, all the muscles that you may use in a movement. Most people, you wouldn't realize how many muscles are involved in just daily, everyday tasks, right? Even, sitting down in a chair, brushing your teeth in the morning, these little things. And by providing you that context and insights, it gives you a whole new perspective of your body and a better understanding of how you're moving in general. And so we could go frame by frame and see exactly, throughout the movement, any sort of leaning, any sort of dysfunction. And we could do this all in 360. Again, this is from one frontal view. So this is, a game changer for the industry, because right now everything you're doing is what you can see on your iPhone, right? You just take a quick video and you can see a 2D, video capture. We're really taking that, many, many steps beyond and showing you an entire virtual environment of how someone's moving, and you can see that slight tilt. That's the asymmetry I was showing you before. Again, this is invisible with the regular eyesight. So you can see how big of a difference this can make, because by noticing this, you can pick up on any sort of movement pathological risk way ahead of time in the care process. And now, if we want to get even more kind of granular, we could look at any plane of motion. We'll look at the hip again, and we'll look at the knee, and we'll show the asymmetry. And now at any port in that movement, you can see exact range of motion measurements and any sort of asymmetry, misalignment at any time throughout the movement. So there's a lot of value in this, specifically in sports, being able to really break down any sort of movement and see any sort of asymmetry, any sort of overcompensation, what have you. And then the best part about this, the big selling point for all of our customers, is all of this information, with one click here, copy to clipboard, it just instantly integrates into their EHR and EMR. So now they have all this objective data that they need, justified care to anyone, anywhere. We're saving people a bunch of time, and we're really changing the entire care process. So I'm going to stop screen sharing here. So that's like a quick overview. I mean, there's so much to dive into, right? And a little bit where we're at as a company. We're based here in Portland, Maine. We have raised some decent capital for some great investors around the U.S. We're in a really exciting part of growth. This summer, going into the summer, we had about 5 employees, and now we just hired our 15th last week. So we've over tripled in size in about 6.5 months, which is, a whirlwind for anyone in the startup world. We're located across the U.S. We're in over 50 locations, some large outpatient facilities with, 10 plus 15 locations, some single small physical therapy shops. And we have a wait list with a little over 200 other clinics around the U.S. And we plan to kind of start branching out more internationally in the next 24 months. So it's an exciting time, a lot of growth, and come a long way since the University of Maine. So I'll pause there because I know I want to make sure we have enough time for Q&A at the end with everyone.
Thank you so much, Justin. I'm just at awe. This technology is so cool. And congratulations on your growth. It's really great to see a Maine company be so healthy and grow so fast. Okay, so we have about 10 minutes left, and I do want to get to some questions. So I will just randomly go through chat and pick some. So this one's going to be for Samir or David. How large can be the chamber? Could you use a chamber instead to isolate, to measure emissions of methane or something like that?
Yeah, I'll address that one. Right now we're sort of optimizing for a specific application and size, but the general design of the framework and the cape enclosure structure lend themselves, to different sizes. And again, right now focus is on healthcare applications. I'm familiar with, from what Baker does, ventilated chambers for other types of applications. So I'm not sure it's quite as unique a value proposition in those areas. But I think certainly there's lots of ways to apply this in the patient care arena. And I think actually might hand off to Samir maybe to talk about some of the other applications that the team has come up with for it.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, we started off really just thinking about applications in the emergency department or throughout the hospital, taking a patient up to a dual occupied room and keeping one patient isolated from the other. But we've actually branched out recently to the operating arena, where patients who are PUIs or potentially COVID positive or known COVID positives can go from the operating room to one of these devices and recover in them. So we're moving our footprint from really just kind of the emergency setting to really more of a capacity setting. We've also thought of things like cruise ships. So if there's any cruise ship people out there with cruise ships connections, these outbreaks happen at sea, and it'd be a great way to quickly isolate segments of sick passengers or patients, depending on whatever the setting is. I wasn't sure if the methane was regards to vehicles or patients, because patients do make methane, but we usually like to filter that and get rid of it.
Okay, well, thank you so much. I didn't think about cruise ships. That's definitely a valid point. A question for Caitlin. Caitlin, could you use the material to encapsulate food supplements?
So are we thinking the micro droplet generation system that I presented and how it can be used to encapsulate cells? So could it be used to encapsulate food supplements like vitamins and stuff like that? If that's the question, the answer is yes. Actually, if in the interest of time, I didn't go into detail in all of what micro droplet generators can be used for, but they are being used as new drug releasing materials in the cosmetics industry for slow release of particular materials, or just to create that type of texture that you want in a material. They're being used in lots of different applications. And I believe that if we could lower the cost of being able to create these things, that we would see many, many more applications come online. Because right now it's very difficult to make these materials at any type of scale, simply due to the fact that you need such specialized systems to create them that are really expensive and not reusable. With our system, we could potentially eliminate those problems. So it's a very exciting place to be. It's an exciting field to work in. And that's why I've got my collaborators who are willing to let me come over and crash their lab for a while. But yeah, we could definitely go there.
Great, that's awesome. I have a question for Justin. I want to make sure everybody answers at least one. Justin, where did you get introduced to this physical therapy space? What's your background?
Yeah, so I went to at the University of Maine, I majored in kinesiology, so the study of the body, and I was also an athlete at the University of Maine. I was a swimmer, and I had a shoulder injury, so I spent a lot of time in PT, basically for a whole year of my my college career, as well as kind of learning about it all. It really just immersed me into the space, and when when COVID hit, we're like, this is a perfect opportunity for us to try to start exploring working with PTs, working with chiros, working with really these movement clinicians, as we like to call them in here, and I've learned so much more about the space than I ever imagined. I think especially over the last year, really immersing myself in understanding, shadowing. Me and my co-founder, we spent almost a week shadowing some PTs, really learning every detail of their workflow. And sometimes I think like, oh, imagine if I went to PT school, what that would look like. But I've learned so much. I love the space, and the people in it are some of the nicest and smartest people I've ever met. So PT is awesome.
Great, thank you. Okay, I think we'll do one more, and this is again for David or Samir. Could you explain the regulatory approval requirements? Which agencies and associated timeline with getting the product approved for the market?
You get that one, David.
All right, sure. I'll jump
You're just a
in. Yeah.
doctor.
Yeah. So, I mean, this has been interesting because of the current time with the pandemic. The FDA has gotten a little bit flexible. I mean, they've always had a path to market called an EUA, an emergency use authorization, which doesn't really lower the bar on sort of safety testing and whatnot, but does sort of allow them a little more leeway on getting things into market sooner. As part of that, there's still requirements that have to be met. For instance, the fan and filter unit that we're using, we purposely selected something off the shelf that already was approved for instance, electrical safety, right? So we didn't have to go through that extra step. It already carries a UL sticker. So that ticks off one of the boxes for the FDA as part of that approval process. And we're still generating a great deal of data. So I guess, quick version is, electrical safety testing, and then performance testing to support the emergency use authorization. That emergency use authorization, and again, this is something that's kind of evolving over time, but at some point, there will be a point where, those will no longer be permitted. So you'd have to move to the full, what they call a 510K registration. And that's supported by clinical trial data, as well as kind of puts a higher bar in terms of freezing the design and maintaining a consistent design of the product over time. So I don't know if that answered the question or not. The timeline, I guess, is we've been told that they're turning around the emergency use authorizations fairly quickly, but we've got a whole other set of data, clinical trials, whatnot that we'll need to do to support a 510K filing. So we're looking at hopefully by the end of this year, maybe a little sooner, having that ready to submit. Also, it'll be quite costly, so we're also looking to raise money to support doing that as well.
Great. Thank you so much, David. Thank you to all of our speakers today. I think this was one of the most interesting coffee hours that we've ever done. It's great to see such a level of innovation in Maine, and also just to see that companies and entrepreneurs in Maine and researchers are fixing real life problems. I'm seeing some great comments in the chat. Our next coffee hour will take place on March the 3rd at 10 a.m. We'll be sending some emails with more info about that. And I just wanted to wish everybody a great rest of your day. It's sunny, hopefully no more snowstorms, and see you next time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye-bye.